So we won't be over here on this side. So we're going to start over.
That way, potentially you can get an ER visit squeezed in before church too.
Well, I told her too, we can start
Kyle,
having dinner with
Kyle, it already died on me, but we're going to see if it was just it went into a sleep mode or whatever. I'm ready. I told him I'm going to read my notes. I'm going to worry about this thing. And I've always got this. This never goes dark. I can go from there. Got it. Well, good evening, everyone. It is so good to be back among the living. The last 10 days have not been any fun. Just ask Kay. But we made it. And I apologize. I'm glad there's no one in the front row. I don't never know when an errant cough is going to come. So I will do this, or I will do this, and try to keep it to myself. I don't think I'm contaminated, but I never know. So I won't spray you tonight with all of this. Didn't Kerry do a great job the last couple of weeks? I called him 24 hours ahead of time and said, hey, I'm not going to be there. Can you be there? He said, my lesson's ready. We'll go with it. We'll go from there. I have never had a teacher before. They just say, cancel the class. And I said, we can't disappoint all these people. We've got to make sure the class continues to go. He was right on it.
He probably didn't offer to take this one for you either, did
Well,
he?
no. Listen, let me tell you something, Dale. He's a great setup man.
Yeah.
He's got me ready, and I'm all set up for this, and I wasn't going to give it up. So, yeah, he wasn't he wasn't going to take it. And I'm prepared tonight when all this keeps... I'm having issues. See, and I don't really care because tonight I brought my notes with me and I'm ready to go. So I'll let you deal with my issues, and I've got my computer and I know what it says, so we'll go from there. I guess a couple of things real quick before we get started. I guess that it's probably been about 50 years since I started teaching adult classes. I've done it for the past 50 years. And what's kind of interesting about that is that I've learned to read my class. And as I read my class, I see faces. The one that's kind of neat that goes on all the time is when somebody, and I ask a question, and their head goes down. I know that they don't want to answer that question, but then I can go ahead and ask them anyhow, and we're ready to go with it. But I like looking around the class. I'm not a mind reader, but I like looking around the class and looking eyeball to eyeball and seeing whether or not, did I make that point? Did it get it across? Is it really going to work? Well, let me tell you, tonight when we start talking about let's get naked, yes, that way, I think I'll see the brightest light bulbs of all that go on in this class. And by the way, that's the only picture you're going to see tonight. The only one. So I'm going to leave it that way, and we'll go on from there. Kay and I have been married for 55 years. In that time, we were talking the other day, and I said, how many marriage seminar classes have we attended? And she said, I think it's somewhere between maybe 18 and 20. And I'm probably going to wear this term out, and I apologize, but I don't apologize for it. I think it's really important for us to understand that the times we went was for basically one word only, and it was affirmation. We wanted to make sure that we affirmed we're doing the right thing. And so often we get into one of these classes, and again, I'm back to what I said earlier. This is a repair shop. That isn't why we started this out, is not to repair anything. We wanted to go to the marriage gym, and we wanted to make sure that we did the things that will make your marriage stronger. We're not here to play Cupid, bringing people together. We're here to find out, what is it going to do? What can I do to make my marriage a stronger relationship with my spouse? I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, take one thing from each of these classes. You don't have to pile on the notes. You just need to say, hey, that'll work. When we took the marriage classes, Kay would look at me and say, hey, that sounds like a great idea. Let's try it. Let's see what happens. Or I'd look at her and say, I hadn't even thought about that kind of a concept before, but let's try it. Let's see what's going to happen with it. Tonight, as we go through the class, I hope you don't mind, but you're adults, except for one. I'm going to be honest and be very frank with you. Some of the things that I'm going to say I probably wouldn't say in front of teenagers. But I think you can handle this, so I hope it's okay for me to be as frank, but yet not embarrassing. Notice I've even changed the title, Intimacy Without Embarrassment. I didn't want to be embarrassed tonight. I knew Kay didn't want to be embarrassed tonight, and I certainly didn't want to embarrass any of you with any kinds of questions or any kind of comments that may make it sound that way. I was intimidated by this lesson, yes. And I think anybody who has read anything about that intimate sexual relationship that couples have, that it was important for me to take a look at this chapter, and we're going to take a look at that in a minute. Would you bow with me as we start with prayer tonight? Father, we're so overwhelmed by your majesty and by your presence here tonight. We are so thankful that you have given us the most wonderful relationship that we can have, husband and wife. And Father, I pray that those who are here tonight and those who have been here very faithfully every week will be finding something, one thing, that they can take home with them and say, let's give that a try. And if it works, it does. If not, you go back to the drawing board and you see what God's got ready for you. And Father, thank you for being our Father and for being present with us tonight. It's in Jesus' name that I pray, and amen. For 20 years, I had the dubious responsibility and honor to take 6th grade boys and talk to them about, one principal will know, talk to them about growing up. The nurse took the girls, we split up, we went one direction or the other. Some years I may have only had 10, other years I may have had 30, but these boys and I had this relationship that we were going to have for this hour-long period. I want to tell you, it was not one of the most comfortable things that I had to do while I was principal of an elementary school. And it's not because I didn't know the anatomy of a man and of a woman. That was not the point. The point of the uncomfortableness, and by the way, the boys were just as uncomfortable, and I knew that by the way they giggled and they snickered and they did all the little things that they were going to do. They weren't my sons. They were not my sons. I felt this was a really good occasion when moms and dads could be working with the maturity level of their children and talking to them in the privacy of their homes. Now, I'm going to tell you, for our two, Kay and I were talking the other day, I'm not sure I did a good job with our son. And I'm not sure, she said, I don't think I did a good job with our daughter. But it was our responsibility. But you know something? That was part of the school curriculum. And I was going to handle it with respect and do what I needed to do to bring that about. Carrie, I'm going to see if it'll work. Hence, our chapter in T&L's book belongs to me tonight. I'm waiting for light bulbs. I think I'm going to catch a few of them coming on, and you know what's going to happen. I want to keep our thoughts and our discussion focused on the aim of the lesson, practical and wholesome. Kay was sitting there reading this book, this chapter, a couple of weeks ago, and I was sitting there and pondering how I was going to do this. And she said, "What's the problem?" I said, "Well, how would you do it? What would you say if you were standing in front of these adult people talking about what we're going to talk about?" Well, here's what she said. This is very prophetic for a woman to say to her husband, but the whole purpose of tonight's lesson is to look at the importance of sexual intimacy in a marriage. I said, "That's all?" "Well, that'll go over really cool. We'll be done with this lesson in no time." She said, "Yeah, but that's all you want to do." And hopefully to accurately understand the KM, you know who that is, they'll understand where you're headed with this. Now, there are some old wives' tales out there. And you may talk to couples that say, "Well, why is their marriage so perfect?" I didn't realize you had to do that. Or what happens if we do this? And you talk and you see things that maybe you never realized before. There were some quotes that came across that were, I thought, interesting. And all I want you to do, whether you think they're right or not, is just marinate on them for just a minute, okay? When it ever comes back up, but I'm going to tell them to you because I've got them right here. He says, churches need to talk about sex. And Dale, I think you said this the other night when we had the class 2 weeks ago, that teenagers and the church needs to talk about sex. Again, you may not agree with that, and that's okay. I'm just putting these up here as something to think about. And I don't have Jeremy in here tonight, nor Carrie, so I wasn't going to put this on him. But I know Jeremy does a great job of working with our teens and some of the things that go on. Second of all, he says, if the only thing Christian kids ever hear about sex from their families is, don't do it. Folks, we're failing them miserably. I think there are a lot of times, and you know your families, you know how you can talk to them, you realize how serious this is. But all we say is, don't do it. Daddy, what's it? You can laugh every once in a while if you want to, but I mean, can you imagine a 13, 14-year-old or younger saying, Daddy, what do you mean don't do it? Somebody is going to have to come along and tell the correct side of the story when it comes to sex and God's plan for it. And I guess the question that I took from Trey in the book was, will the family be that someone? Or is it going to be the locker room? Is it going to be the neighborhood? Is it going to be the usual places that we find that our kids are learning all about this stuff? And they're going to call it more than it. They're going to have some real words for us if we don't watch out. And we'll be shocked by so many of those things. See, it's not working, but I am, so I'm right here where I can see my computer. In the creation, Adam and Eve, some intimate observations from the text. What apparel did they wear in the garden before sin? He taught you this lesson 2 weeks ago. What apparel did they wear before sin? They were, here comes the word, they were naked. All right, I'll say it. Can you imagine for just a minute? Can you imagine for just a minute Adam and Eve standing there looking at each other and saying, honey, we don't look like those animals they call cows. We don't have long necks like those giraffes. We've named them. It's interesting, Adam, you're hairy all over. I'm not going there with Carrie because he already told us the wild story a couple weeks ago. Leave it alone. Leave it alone. But can you look at and you can see these two looking at each other and saying, I don't know what Eve was saying, but Adam's saying, wow. Wow. Can I touch you? Your skin looks really soft, and mine is muscular, whatever. But they're going through this conversation, and now, were they ashamed? No, because they've yet to sin. They've yet to come to the realization of, look what's happened. Now, Carrie, he described naked last week, 2 weeks ago now. Its meaning to Adam and Eve, without covering, nothing hidden from one another. They had absolutely nothing to hide. I have to keep looking over my shoulder, seeing where we are. Some more thoughts. Sex was created by God to be a gift to married people. God never created sex to be shameful or dirty. Let me throw a couple of words at you. Hormones. Now, don't say anything. Just rumble these around. Hormones. Teenagers. Pictures. Imagination. ... boys. Now, girls, I'm sorry. You know, I had a sister. I don't know what she went through. I never asked her about hormones. I never dealt with that kind of thing with her. I just assumed that some of it was the same. But let me tell you something. When I think of those kinds of things, it's not a really good formula for wholesome, God-centered growing up. Listen, my friends and I in the neighborhood, I'll never forget the day that one of my friends brought this picture of a half-naked woman to school. I don't know, 13, we were 12, I don't know what age we were, but he brought that thing in, and out on the playground where there was no adult watching us, he unfolded the picture. Bob, where did you get, and it's not Bob Harrington. Bob, that's who my friend's name was, Bob. Bob, where did you get this picture? Oh, I just found it along the side of the road. Sure you did. And then we were conjuring up in our minds, oh man, that's a female? Different. We wanted to know more. We started getting all of these concepts. Now, I'm going to go on to the next one, Carrie. I think the next one got some. If it is sex has become bad, it's because we have messed it up in the world. We have made something it was not intended to be. We read about that in 1 Corinthians chapter 7 a couple of weeks ago. Some of the things that we read about in the Bible, and listen, if you want to really have your eyes open, Google Corinth, 1st century, social stuff. I was amazed at what I found that was going on in Corinth in the 1st century. Paul only touches on a few things, but so much of it was crazy stuff within the family. If that's not, I'm sorry Mel's not here tonight. I was going to stand him up for some things, but if you have, go to Genesis chapter 29 and chapter 30. Listen, Jacob with Leah and Rachel. Well, he's given me 2 sons. How many has he given you? Well, I'm going to bed with him tonight. I'll bet he gives me 1 tonight. And this conversation's going on throughout Genesis because of the family relations that they had. And you can only sit there and only imagine, oh my goodness, somebody's getting worn out. But this is the kind of thing that has been happening. The world, something else that Trey and Leah said, that the world has made sex a god. A god. However, I understand it this way, that we're not to put anything in front of God or above God. God is where I want him to be. He is the standard for today. Now, the next thing you would have seen, and I'm just reading it off the computer, sex sells. Sex sells. Everyone knows it. During the winter months when it's kind of cold, Kay and I will do our walking, usually at one of the malls. It takes us an hour. We do a couple of miles. Have you ever done any window shopping at the mall? Hey, 50 years ago, Victoria's Secret didn't exist. Now, not only does it exist, there's chairs sitting out around the foyer where you can just sit down and stay all day if you want to. Ladies, I hope that you don't mind me saying this, but it's true. And she tells me this. Ladies, you're being exploited. You're being exploited. It all comes down to how much of the female body you're allowing to be exploited in front of you as a church. I was on the computer the other day, and I'm trying to find basketball games and baseball in the summer and so forth. And what pops up in front of me is a couple walking on the beach. I would say he had 10% of his body showing. The young lady, in a very, very small piece of garment called a bikini, had probably 90% of her body showing. Is that exploitation? I can't. I taught in a school one time where one of the teachers, who was a member of the church, came up and he said, "Did you see Mrs. So-and-so today?" I was assistant principal. I said, "No, I wasn't looking for." A very attractive lady. He said, "Well, when you see her today, I want to tell you something. There's more material in my handkerchief than there is in her dress." Public schools, right there where so many people would sit. Boys, guys, ladies, this is happening. Sex sells. And no matter what you're watching, whatever commercial it is, this is the frankness that we need to hear some things about. Sex has become a common theme in the world, and it doesn't like me tonight, Carrie. And sadly, the world has it all wrong. Here's the thing. Sex has become common. And so it's been taken away from the way God wanted it to be and brought it into what the world has made it to be. Now, Trey and Leah tell us 5 things of what sex is for. You know, and if I would ask a class this size to tell me on a little piece of paper, I want you to tell, what is sex for? And you got to give me one word. I have a feeling that the word I would get would come up quite often. Well, they say that sex is for pleasure. And I don't think anybody would argue with that. Anybody that has a relationship with their spouse knows that, hey, that was fun. That was for pleasure. He also says God created sex for you to enjoy with your spouse. It's when two people become one. Do we understand oneness before I go on? When Kay and I dated, she was here and I was here. And as we dated and as we got to know each other and as we became closer and as we were married, we became one. That means that we have one paycheck, we have one bed, although back in the 50s, I think because of family shows on TV, there was two. One bed, we have one car, we have one house. We became one as a couple. Sexual intimacy is what separates roommates from soulmates. Listen, when I was at Ohio Valley College and at Lipscomb, I had some really great friends who were my roommates. I would tell you we had fast cars, we played ball together, we had to study every once in a while together, but we did things together. But let me tell you something. Once she came into my life, she was not my roommate. She was my soulmate. We became that one person, maybe not in every agreement that we had, but that's the way it was. Now, there is no connection in this world as powerful as the connection of sex in marriage. Okay, I'm going to say this, and it's Carrie's fault. I have yet, and maybe you have, but I have yet to go into a hardware store and ask for a garden hose that has two female ends. Or two male ends. They laugh at me. Sir, it doesn't work that way. Listen, even dogs and cats are smart enough to figure it out.
At least dogs are.
Yeah, well, I'm not going to go to the dog-cat thing tonight, but we get. Why can't we figure this out? Don't answer that question. Let's move on. Therefore, think of the pleasures that you have experienced in your life, because for us, for Kay and myself, our intimate relationship makes us complete. It makes us complete. Without that relationship that we have forged over the years, I would just say we would be an incomplete pair. So, sex is for pleasure. Sex is for procreation. Genesis chapter 4, verse 1, now the man had relations with his wife Eve, and she conceived and gave birth to Cain. And she said, I have gotten a man-child with the help of the Lord. That's the New American Standard. ESV says he knew his wife. The NIV says Adam made love. There's a lot of things with this, but throughout the ages, children have been born because of the intimacy of sex. Man's relationship was with his wife under God's specific approval. Okay, close your ears. She never gets embarrassed. So that first night, I just want to say this one thing, and maybe it would be embarrassing. I don't think so. But that first night in 1969, when we huddled up together, made me more aware of Kay and her needs than any wild stories, any glamour pictures, any obnoxious things that the boys talked about. But when we had that opportunity to become one as God planned it to happen, that was the time I think we both realized how important that it was. Third, sex is knowledge. So we've got pleasure, we've got pro-existence knowledge. Sexual intimacy provides an avenue to get to know someone better than anyone else in the world knows them. Kay and I only had 3 months. I'm sorry to use all of these personal things, but we were on a Christian campus. We had breakfast together. We had lunch together. We had dinner together. We had classes together. We had games together. We had times that we just sat in the park around Lipscomb and just let our time fly away. We went on dates together. We certainly didn't have that romantic Sam's background with hot dogs and Cokes, but you know, we had some of our own kinds of things that we got into, and we were learning each other's habits. Some she didn't like of me, I didn't like of her, but we made it through some of those times. Your knowledge of your spouse goes far beyond what others know of your spouse, because knowledge and knowing one another in an intimate way. Dating helped us get here. But let me tell you something. Living together seals the deal. It just brings it all there. And if you've made those right choices, then I think it's all going to work out for the best. So knowledge comes. There are things about Kay and about me that you don't want to know. I just know there are. These are characteristics that take a lifetime to know and adjust to. Intimate should mean, see if this makes any sense, intimate should mean behind closed doors and for only us to experience. It doesn't come down to the fact that when, fellas, we go to work, or ladies, when you go to whatever it is you go to, you don't stand around or sit around talking about, wow, last night was great. Let me tell you what we did. It was all in our bedroom, and we don't go there. That's not anybody else's business. What happens for us is what happens for us. Fourth, sex is for protection from temptation. I was going to make 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 3 through 6 a focus tonight, but I decided not to. I don't like the way some versions give this to you. I'm going to read it. But if you're looking at anything in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verses 3 through 6, we studied this again on Sunday morning a while back. But Paul says this: let the husband fulfill his duties. I've never looked at her and thought, this is my duty. I think some versions even say it's a benevolent act. I don't necessarily like that one. Fulfill his duties to his wife, and like also the wife to her husband. Paul makes both of them go. The wife does not have authority over her own body, but the husband does. And likewise also the husband does not have authority over his own body, but his wife does. Just when you think you got Paul, you know him. Because he's already told you in the first 2 verses, it's okay to be single. But if you can't make it single, then here's some rules to go by. Stop depriving one another except by agreement. I don't like that word either. For a time that you may devote yourselves to prayer and come together again, lest Satan tempt you because of your lack of self-control. There's a lot to be said with that one, and you could spend an entire chapter, Carrie, as we'd go into that thing. But I think I'm going to leave it alone at this point and say, read that. Take a look at it. It's a level of protection from temptation when you have sex with your spouse. And this does not define your love in marriage, but rather your feeble attempt to follow God's plan from the beginning. Finally, sex is for oneness. The two shall become one flesh. Genesis chapter 2, verse 24. The fact that 2 people became one is a miraculous thing. This is God's plan for relationships. All the emotions and all of the sexual attitudes and physical attitudes will come into play. There is an amazing power in sex, and that is probably an understatement. The world has tried to make sex common, but God made it special. And this is one of the things, I know she won't tell you, but she came to me with a good thought today or yesterday regarding what is marriage all about anyhow? Well, dare I try it? It's about being special. You see, what the world has tried to do is say, it's common. Anything that happens is common. But Kay said, I was always taught that I was to save myself for the special relationship I'll have with that one person that I'll live with forever. There was a magazine put out, and I meant to tell you this earlier, but there was a magazine, Christian Woman. And Kay found an article in that magazine about 6-7 years ago, something like that. And I'm only going to give you the Cliff Notes form of it, but what this magazine article said, look girls, and I think it applies to women, the female person as well. If we, she's a lady talking to ladies, she said, if we bring upon the boy, the man, with our dress that creates within him the lust that he may have for your body, you're as bad sinning as what he is by lusting. And I think all of this comes back to that special time that we make for ourselves, and we're Christians, to know exactly what we need to do. There was a part of the book, and I'm not going to go into it, but it was regarding, and since this is not up here, it's about human bonding. If you have the book, you've been reading this chapter, and you'll know what that is, so I'm going to leave it go at that. Okay, this is the fun part. I've got 8 comments that they made, and you have to listen to me unless you want to come up and look at my computer. Did you know that, they said in there, did you know that there is a difference? Let's have some fun with this. Did you know that there is a difference in men and women? This was a good last section of the book. I wrote down here, God wired men and women up differently when it comes to sex. And I wrote the next word is HMMMMMM. Yeah, different? Really? Okay. Men, it's always better up here. Men generally have a high sex drive, but it only drops off the day they die. Most women reach a peak in their sex drive in their 40s, which levels off after a few years. And I said, remember, this is me. Remember, this is just in most women. I can only speak for one. You can only speak for one, whatever. Okay, you'll like this one. Men get aroused very quickly, while women can take much longer. Men are like microwaves. Cup of coffee, heated in a minute. And women are like slow cookers. Slow cookers, you must turn on early in the day in order to have food ready for supper. Okay, now we've got you in the right direction. Now it gets better. Husbands, you need to begin to understand that if you are waiting until bedtime to start sowing the seeds of love, you might have started too late. Send her messages during the day. Pursue her gently with other things that she may appreciate. At least when this thing's on, you're looking up there and not right at me. Husbands, you also need to understand that what words turn your wife on one time might not work the next time. Sounds very prophetic to me. I wish that I had these about 30 years ago. A woman's largest sexual organ is found in her mind, and minds are very complex. But I also added to that, respect her for her needs. Important. Your wife needs to feel, and I like this one too, your wife needs to feel an emotional connection from you before she is ready for a physical one. There's another That's the reason you need to plug in the slow cooker early in the morning. Now, they usually have a lot of laughter that follows through with that. So if you're in the mood, you go right ahead. There are a lot of things in this particular chapter. How many of you have the book? And this is not a yes or no, but yeah, okay, some of you do. There's a lot of things in the book that I didn't want to go into tonight. One of which, your wife needs an occasional connection from you before she's ready for a physical one. We went over that. Bring your best attitudes to the table. And I think so many things will work out. There was a section in the book called the Intimacy Killers. And it's for husbands to understand, but I'm not going to, again, go into that one. I think I would have gotten in a lot of trouble, so I'll leave it alone. There's also a great story about a couple. They were in their 90s, and they went to one of their seminars. Been married for 70 years. I'm going to try this story because it was funny. They came every night. He was dressed in a suit. She was dressed in a Sunday best. And they sat in that second row every single night, 90. When it was all over with, Trey said, I just couldn't help. I had to go find out. You know, what gives you the longevity of what you're doing and the patience for whatever's happening? He said, let me tell you this. She came to me the other day, and she said to me, 90 years old, let's go upstairs and have sex. And he looked back at her and he said, honey, I can only do one of those at a time. Trey, and I'm glad Trey's going to be here. I get to introduce him, I think, coming up in Affirming the Faith. But the stories like that, the last one, the last little thing that would have been up here, it's here. Ladies, it's just for you. Last piece of advice. Ladies, if you are in the mood sexually, let him know. You ask, how do I know if he's in the mood? He says, just look at him, and if you see that he is breathing, he is either in the mood or he will be in about 1 minute. Just remember the cup of coffee in the microwave. I think that works. On a more serious note, and I wanted to end this way, and it's probably the thing that interested me most, and it's mostly my words. God's been in our presence all night. God's always in our presence. God's in our presence as we look to Him for guidance. God's in our presence. I have been loving the Ecclesiastes lessons that Tyler's been bringing us on Sunday evenings. And I was unable to be here, but I streamed it, and it was an amen kind of sermon, as which most of them have been, if not all. But one of the things that I wrote down here was, this is important. Remember to read God's Word, to implement His truths, and know that He created all the wholesome, that was the aim of the lesson, and practical advice needed for sexual happiness. Let your godly imagination run wild about nakedness. Would you bow with me and we'll close class? Father, thank you for giving us your plan. Thank you for our wives, for the husbands that make this marriage complete. for helping us to understand the physical side of marriage, yet is even a sensitive part of marriage. Help us to be honest with our children, our grandchildren. Help us to love each other daily. Help us to realize the things that we're looking at in this book, the things that we're looking at in your book, are made through reality to your will. Be with us safely as we go home tonight. Bring us back at the time that we will worship you again, but help us to worship you every day in spirit and in truth. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you all for being here and putting up with my whatever. We'll get it figured out. Now, that's 2 minutes early.